You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by Freight Plus. I'm your host, Kyle McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. It's another SCU30 day, and I apologize for screaming at you, but I'm excited. Supply Chain Under 30 SCU30s, where we talk to supply chain professionals under or at the age of 30, sort of about their journey into the supply chain. Now, the really fun part about supply chain is it's not just load planners or brokerage or stuff like that. There's a lot of opportunity to work in the supply chain, and my guest for today really found an interesting opportunity. Today, we're going to have Clay Phillips, Business Development Manager at Supply Chain Now, join the show to talk about his experience creating content for the supply chain. Clay is going to talk a little bit about what drove him to pursue the career in the supply chain, talk about graduating during the pandemic because he's one of those lucky few, and then his experience working in a supply chain content creation company. So without further ado, Clay, how's it going, my man?
Hey, Kyle. Doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Always fun to get a behind the scenes guy in front of all this stuff, especially
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
trying to make Greg and Scott look pretty all the time. You're like, might as well actually get some talent out in front of the camera once in a while.
of course. Yeah, just like we spoke about in pre-show, I can probably count on one hand how many times I've been in front of the camera, but always happy to do it, and definitely appreciate you, Kyle, because I'm sure you do production and interviewing. So
Oh yeah. One time I should probably talk because I'm switching while we talk. All these things like people think I just record two videos and I do all this stuff in post. All this is live, baby. It's it's fun, but yeah. Enough about me. Why are we talking about me, Clay? Talk to me a little bit. What was kind of growing up? Where'd you grow up? Kind of what were your interests? That type of stuff.
So if you couldn't tell, I'm from Georgia. You got it right here. I got it right behind me. I grew up in Dalton, Georgia, which is a little town people may know as the carpet capital of the world. Yeah, there you go. Big carpet in the 80s, like Shaw, Mohawk, Bob Shaw is pretty much God around here. Um, no, so yeah, it's about an hour north of Atlanta, and it's great to grow up in a small town. I really, you appreciate smaller things, and being in the South too. I thought it was a great place to land.
Now, what was growing up? I mean, what were you interested in? What was it like? Were you kind of a video guy? Were you a mathlete? What do you play sports?
Man, so I went through some phases. So I was a nerd, big nerd when I was like in elementary school. I was like big into Greek mythology and just weird things, weird little things like that, and just knew everything about it. When the I don't know if you remember Percy Jackson,
Hmm?
written by Rick Riordan.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm back and forth. I was a Percy Jackson kid, not Harry Potter, even though I did love Harry
Oh, that
Potter.
must have been very awkward. You're like, who wants to go to Barnes and Noble for the Percy Jackson book release? And everyone's like, what the hell are you talking about, dude?
But big into that kind of stuff, big into comic books as well. I drew a lot of influence from both my brothers, which are they're 9 and 11 years older than me. So might have been a happy little accident here, but um, but yeah. And then like most people, I went through a really awkward phase in middle school. Like did some skater type stuff. Wore the Etnies shoes and the DC stuff and all that. And then I kind of came into my own in sports. And I played football in high school. Ended up getting a scholarship to play at Kennesaw State University, which is a Division I school just north of Atlanta. Pretty relatively new program, and so definitely went through some phases growing up.
I mean, who didn't, right? We were like kind of 90s-ish kids. Like, you got to have the big old skater shoe tongue, like all that fun stuff. Couldn't do a
Yeah,
kickflip.
so
Still can't do a kickflip.
the single bar lacing,
Oh,
you
yeah.
had to.
Anytime I see someone do a kickflip, I'm like, how the hell do you do that? Like, especially now. I'm like, I'm going to tear an ACL if I get on a skateboard. Um, what about schooling wise? What were you interested in? Kind of what, like, non phase wise, what were you kind of doing school? Like, was history guy? Were you a math guy? That type of stuff?
Right, right. So no math, no math. We'll get that out of the way up front. Not a math guy, not good with numbers. My brain's just never been wired like that. I was a really good writer in school, and so when I, I committed to play football in college, so academics were kind of always secondary there, and I do regret that a little bit. I went and spoke to some kids at my high school now. Um, about a year or two ago and told them, it's awesome to work that hard in athletics and do that and earn that, but you have to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing for 99% of the population is going to be academics. No one's going to the NFL out of Dalton, Georgia. Even though we do have one right now, Isaiah Mack with the Denver Broncos, which is an alumni of my high school. So shout out to Isaiah. I'm sure he won't listen to this, but
Oh, he's a big fan of consulting logistics.
fan good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was a great writer, and I loved writing, and so I was originally a journalism major my freshman year, which it makes sense now because the content creation and the narrative behind the content that we put out, it kind of came full circle. So and that was at Kennesaw State, and then a year later I transferred to the University of Georgia, which is where I graduated from in December.
There you going with the. So when you went, it was you were just focused on sports. There wasn't like your plan after high school wasn't like, oh, I'm kind of interested in this. You're just sort of like, I mean, to be honest, right? I got into freaking marketing and media was because Anchorman had kind of come out my senior year, and I thought the movie was funny. And mom's like, well, if you think it's funny, like that's kind of being on the news. Would you be interested in that? And I had no idea. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So that's how I got into this. But did you kind of, or were you just focused on like football, football, football? Like I'm gonna play sports and like not really think just yet? Which is
Pretty much, man. I had it's kind of, they say I had hoop dreams. So I thought I really did think that there was a chance to make it big and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And obviously, shoot for the stars. No matter what you do, there's always a possibility that you're gonna make it to the top, no matter where you're at. But yeah, no, I was very much that first and academics second. I told people up until like the first semester of my junior year, they would ask me my major. I'd be like, business. And they're like, well, what? And I'm like, I don't really know. Just business. Like I didn't even know. But yeah, then so I didn't play at Georgia. I transferred out, and that was the end of my football career. So then I went straight and Terry College of Business, which is the business program at Georgia. It's all you hear people talk about when you're on campus, and it's the cream of the crop. And I hate to be braggadocious, but I really set my sights on that, and that was then the top that I wanted to attain. So then that's when I looked into marketing and got into professional sales, and still no supply chain though. Still didn't even know what it was probably.
right. That's like the marketing courses don't come close to talking about supply chain. None of that matters and stuff. So you were still. It's interesting because I kind of hearing that it's still like kind of short term focused a little bit at that point in time, right? You were like, I want to get into this business school. It wasn't that like this business school helps me out with more of this type of stuff. Like you're still kind of not just yet that career focus. Which,
Not at all.
yeah, I
Very
was 100% the same. I still kind of am 100% the same, but like it's that more creative mind. You're kind of thinking like, hey, I could be creating this, or I could be doing that type of stuff, right?
it was very one thing at a time, and I have a tendency to focus on one thing and dive totally into it, and that be my life at the time. So how I got into marketing was I was bartending in school for some side money, and then the manager came to me and was like, hey, do you want to start running our social media accounts? I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I start running the Instagram, and I figure out, some techniques to gain followers. And obviously in that industry, the content that you can put out is so much fun and hilarious. And we've got our regulars coming in, and they're like, hey, I saw that post on the Instagram today. It's awesome. And I'm like, that was me. So that's kind of when I fell in love with marketing, but it was still totally just the social media side. I mean, it had nothing to do with the broader field that is marketing. And so it really wasn't until probably my core classes that I got into, that I really understood the depth of the field.
So, when did, I mean, how does social media, or sorry, how does supply chain come into play? Like, that's the
So
interesting thing of all this, right?
this is a funny story. And if you've You may have heard it a few times if you listen to our podcast at Supply Chain Now, but I am I am very honored and blessed to date Greg White's daughter, Delaney, um, my girlfriend of over 2 years now. And I'm looking for a job after my junior year of college. And Greg is, of course, this, business guru. Just as soon as you meet him, you know that this guy is he's top notch. So I asked him, hey, do you have anything that I could maybe some kind of prospect for me, something that somebody I could reach out to? And he's like, my buddy Scott Luton is starting something up, and I wonder if he could use an extra hand. And then now, here we are.
Here we are. Now, was that you were looking for a job, or was it kind of internship, like got to get out, get some experience?
Internship, and I
Oh, okay.
struck out on everything I applied for. And to be
Really?
honest, my resume was not impressive whatsoever. It was kind of that short-sightedness, dude. I did not invest in my career at that point. So I mean, I even almost went and interviewed at like an MLM. Like, I mean, it was embarrassing almost.
No,
So,
I did the same. I
yeah,
literally almost did. I almost left. I was living up here in Boston doing a marketing or is doing a production thing, but it's one of those like you just feel like you're being used. You're working 60-hour work weeks for like nothing. And I'm living in Boston where like I'm living in a bad location, small, where I'm like when I lived in Florida, I was living in mansions compared to where I lived up here. And like I was like, what am I doing? And then all of a sudden winter hit. I'm like, really, what the hell am I doing? And I
yeah.
like went down to Jacksonville and I did an interview with a very like small. I would have been selling office like supplies door to door to businesses, and like literally offered me the job. But I was like, I don't know if this is kind of what I want to be doing. But I was exactly the same. Like you weren't focused. Were you doing activities? Like were you doing stuff in college, or was it mainly just you going to Georgia? What? Why need to do activities? Like, or is it kind of just hang out and enjoy college?
Well, Athens is a very fun town. There were lots of activities. We don't have to dive into the details, but yeah, I was a typical Athens kid. I was doing a little bit more Athens than I was doing school. um, but
Dude,
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially in that town. You can really come into your own and find out who you are in that side, in that kind of scenario. And it's a great way to get yourself straight, to get that out of your system. And going to the bars and all that stuff is awesome and fun, and it's great to meet people and that whole thing and have that college experience. And there's no better place to do it than Athens. So
you were like one of the first. I literally, you were me. Like we were enjoy the experience, right? You're young, you only get it once in a while. I mean, yeah, there's a lot that you could be doing, and a lot of stuff that you're gonna look back and be like, man, I kind of wish that I focused a little bit on this or that. But like my roommate, all 4 years of Florida State was my best friend. I was in his wedding. He was in my wedding. He literally didn't go to school after freshman year. He failed out of Florida State, and he was a community college, but we lived together for all 4 years, and like he constantly wasn't graduating like community college, and like he's a nuclear engineer now. Like he makes way more than me, but like it's one of those. Sometimes it's just the journey. Some people are focused very young, and other people take some time and enjoy that type of thing. It's not bad any other way, but it's a great point. I love that type of stuff. So you're more about living that type of thing. And then you kind of hit that junior year. You're like, all right, time to put on my adult pants, get a button up shirt. Can't wear my like one wedding outfit I had to wear when I went to a cousin's wedding. So let's start. I want to talk about graduating in the pandemic, but I know that supply chain now kind of happened before that. So let's talk a little bit about that internship experience and kind of what were you doing and how was that? Because you're working for a startup, which is really cool. You're working for something that's brand new that they kind of are learning their way. What was it like kind of joining the supply chain now when it really was more of Scott's kind of in his head?
so it was a side gig before it what it is now. And I hope we don't need any introduction to anyone that's going to be listening to this now. But if you've never heard of us, check us out. It's incredible to think about that it was totally just a hobby of Scott's, and then he kind of figured out there's room for this, and there is a place for this, and to be very successful. Um, so when I first came on, I'm literally just like I run the Instagram, had like 20 followers. I'm getting access to like the LinkedIn, had like 700 followers or something. I mean, it was just like Scott, you know, love him to death, but he's not exactly a graphic designer. So some of the content that he's putting out is just, so I come in and I've got a lot to work with. And then then Greg came on strategically as well. And then that's when we really blasted off, and it's kind of been me, Greg Scott, and Amanda Luton, our CMO, Scott's wife, since the beginning. And it's so blessed. It's just been such a great experience.
Now it's interesting because, like you say, Scott's not a designer, but you also, it wasn't like you were doing design work. You weren't doing that stuff. But I think it's more that it's that younger type of thing. I mean, how was it? Was it just easy for you to kind of pick up on some of the stuff like a Photoshop or a Canva and those kind of design elements? Like, how much did technology play, and how was it just that you're just, not to say Scott's old. Love you, Scott. We're about to make fun of you much later in this interview.
Right.
But how much of it was just the fact that you're younger? You kind of grew up with this stuff. Like, how much did that help you in that kind of more fast-paced learning as you go environment?
Yeah. So, being in our generation, you're creating content and have been digital content your entire life almost. These kids that are coming up now, I mean, they're going to be. I can't wait to see where they take the
I hate them.
industry.
They're already
I'm
doing too much stuff too fast for me.
Yeah, I'm very jealous. I mean, it's YouTube. There's a kid, the highest earning kid on YouTube is like 6 years old. Has his own YouTube channel.
The one that opens his gifts, right?
Yes,
Dude,
yes.
just like Scott figured out, like, hey, supply chain needs content. Like, it's probably like 5 years ago, one of my coworkers was like, hey, my kid watches this 2-year-old open presents every single day. Would you be interested in filming my kid do this? I was like, yeah, let's do it. Because I kind of knew that, like, I knew that world. And like, we missed out because she's like, I don't know about putting my kid out into something. I'm like, yeah, I kind of understand. But I'm like, now you see that whole like kid opens presents, and it's like, it's an industry of like, this kid has a whole production team. The parents are doing things. Like, it's crazy how much content. I am sorry for cutting you off right now. I realize I just did. Continue.
And you're totally right. I mean, it's just that you always think when something blows up, like, man, I thought about doing that. And it's always too late. Hindsight's 2020. But Canva saved my life in those days, the early graphic design days. But it was really just a lot of trial and error, a lot of A/B testing, a lot of learning as you go, and a lot of failure. A lot of some of the content that I created when I first came on, if I looked at it now, I'm ashamed. But you got to
Yeah.
start somewhere, and it was a team effort. That's for sure. I can't even begin to talk enough about how much Amanda helped and has guided me and has led me. So
You
it
know
wasn't
that.
always pretty. It wasn't always pretty.
Oh no, no, it never is pretty. I mean, every production I do, the next there's like worse, like the worst one yet, like more or less in my mind. I'm always like, why did I do that? I could have done this better. But that's part of being that kind of content creator. You should always be starting to think about it. I think one interesting thing, right, is like you talk about like I was doing Instagram for bars, which yeah, that's probably fun as hell. It's easy because you can just find cool things. You're like just be willing to take pictures and have no shame. But when we hit the supply chain, it gets a little funkier. I mean, where did you find some passion? Like what interested you, especially when it came to kind of creating content? Because you're working in this unknown area, but it's also something you just don't know anything about. So what interested you kind of early on with it?
So my focus early with content, and it's still our focus now, and it's really what we do it's really a focus of our business model now is I focus on people first. Don't focus on concepts. Don't focus on any technicalities. You don't even have to know. I mean, I didn't know what supply chain was even like 6 months after I started working here. I mean, so what I focused on was the people and the moments of genius that came across, and a quote would come across and I would know I need to capture that. I need to put it on I need to design it. I need to put their picture beside it, make them look pretty. And that's really the focus of the content still today is people first. and moments of genius first and thought leadership first. And you learn how to do all the little flashy things along the way, but as long as you keep that, keep the main thing right there, the thought leadership, then the content creates itself.
It's interesting too. I find that a lot of supply chains are real people, right? We're marketers. You're kind of used to the stuff that's like news and like all these like they're just talking sound bites. They're not talking specific. And I think that's one of the interesting things I find when it comes to like supply chain people is that they're actually like humans that are experiencing stuff that are going through, and they're all problem solvers. They all really want to make this kind of very unique solution for something that like kind of affects everyone. So it's been a fun kind of like seeing that type of stuff. Talk a little bit, because I mean, you're in the internship, you're kind of about to graduate. What kind of was that plan? I mean, were you the did the internship wrap up, or was it just something that you kind of continue to have, and you're like, man, this is kind of interesting, it's growing with me, and I'm about to enter like the real world? What kind of happened there?
So it didn't take long for me to know that Scott was onto something great, and that I wanted to attach my wagon to to the supply chain now van per se. So I asked them after the internship, which went well. Could I stay on part time while I'm still taking classes, and sort of still manage the social media, and give input here and there, because as we were a startup in every sense of the word. So everyone did everything. I mean, you wear so many hats, especially as a marketing person. You're in sales, communications, PR, even like production and that sort of thing. So I couldn't leave really, and that was totally fine with me. And I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, I like it. So you went to Scott and was like, hey, this is about to wrap. Like, what's our next step? Like, I want to kind of continue this, do full time, or was this sort of like, it was just like a no brainer?
There just kind of wasn't even a discussion,
Right,
man.
right.
We were kind of 2 weeks into school, and I'm like, I can juggle this. And so he was like, man, we kind of forgot to have this conversation. Do you want to leave, or how's school going, and that sort of thing? And I was like, I can do both. So, let me stick around and see where this thing goes.
It's all about working hard too. I mean, I had the same, like the production company I was working for was the same thing. It was like internship period was ending. And it was just that I really enjoyed what we were doing. So I worked my butt off. And like at that point, it was just like, this guy's invaluable. Like we can't lose this person. So like, how do we keep this going? Like, how do we not get rid of this? It's a part of the internship, right? I preach a lot about like use the internship to learn what you like to do and what you hate to do. But if you really, really, really like the place you're at, you can work your butt off and be indispensable and be something that people are going to really enjoy. So that's awesome. So you kind of did that. You're working through this stuff. Graduation comes, and like they're just like, we're keeping this train rolling. We're growing too much. Like this is a startup. We can't get rid of you.
Yeah, as much as they might have
Put it in
wanted.
Scott. Yeah. Yeah. Scott couldn't get rid of me. I'm his
I
best.
mean, of course, a kid in school. So we had our moments, but no, I mean, we've always had each other's back, and it's like man, we built this thing together, and Scott and Amanda really built this thing. Greg and I kind of hitched our wagons to the train, like I said earlier, but it's yeah. I mean, when I say that we never looked back and there was never a question about where I wanted to be, man, that's the truth, and it's still true today.
That's awesome, man. And I think that's interesting too, because what we're talking about now is coronavirus. Like you graduated the winter before coronavirus kind of shut down everything. And then you went from kind of working full time in Atlanta, kind of doing a cool, like in this really hip area, to like shut down at home, right? I mean, looking at your background, I'm guessing it's kind of you guys went straight to work from home and all this stuff. Talk a little bit about that transition of going from, hey, I'm about to enter the real world, do some real work and stuff, to this kind of weird world we transitioned into.
So a few things there probably. Um, our generation adapts very well digitally. So I think a lot of the hardships and the pain points that people had, we got lucky there, and we were able to adapt and thrive. Another thing too, though, is that being a digital media company, a lot of our stuff was already remote. I mean, we did a lot of things for Zoom calls. We used production services online and that sort of thing. So it
You,
wasn't that big of a
okay.
leap for us. It really just, the biggest struggle for us was content, because you're in the studio, you're taking pictures of the guests, you have clips and videos of the guests in the studio and that sort of thing. Now we're like, all right, where do we get the stuff we're going to be posting? So we had to adapt there for sure.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's sort of the same. Like, I hate to keep always pushing it back towards me, but it's one of those, like, you already had, like, 'cause you don't have the budget to fly in guests. You're not a television production, so it had to be done via Zoom. It had to be done during these kind of like
Yeah,
remote things. So it was kind of easy to transition because you kind of already were having to do that. It's just now the host is somewhere else, which
yeah.
also is a
I always say
nightmare. You
people
could probably
now,
tell.
the world that people are living in now and having adapt, I'm like, welcome. Like we've been doing this for a while.
Right, you're like, don't sit behind a window, idiots. Even though it's the best location I have in my freaking house. That's what I learned, is that, like, this is not set up at all for good stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, how did you kind of take that? Like, especially the learning stuff. I mean, that's one of those big things too. You're fresh, not fresh out of college, and luckily it was in a business that you've been working in for a while. But how do you kind of continue to learn? How do you kind of keeping up with the supply chain when you're kind of more on your own personal journey and not being able to soak in knowledge kind of because you just happen to be in an office? Tough question that just came up off the top of my head.
Lucky for me, our content is educational in nature, and I'm constantly absorbing. And it's like I always tell Scott and Greg, like I find myself spitting things up that I must have taken in through osmosis, because I definitely don't remember listening to it, but they'll say it and then I just repeated exactly what they said at this point in time. And I think I've even done it a few times on this interview. But yeah, no, and it also doesn't hurt that they are just such fearless leaders and mentors. And this, um, this idea of continuous education lands in our group, and I know that they always be learning is kind of a thing that we play on, always be closing. But yeah, no, that it's certainly been a challenge to stay in touch and to stay focused. But you get a team together that works as well together as I think we do, and that becomes a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about those two. I got some questions for you about them. So you kind of, like, it's interesting, right? Because you knew Greg because he was your girlfriend's dad, which is always going to be interesting. But what was your impressions of the two of them when you first got to meet them? Candid, just
You're exactly
quick.
right. That will always be an interesting story and an interesting
Always.
to this point. But my first impression of Scott was, first real job, you're always intimidated, but he immediately made you feel welcome. And Amanda as well. I remember jumping on a conference call with them, and I'm buttoned up and ready. I have my agenda, my talking points. I'm like, here's where I can bring you value. And they're like, man, you don't have to do that. We know that you're going to be great for us. Like, we have every ounce of confidence that you're going to do great things with us. You don't have to put on this facade for us. So welcoming and warm and just kind, and every vibe that you get from him to this day was my first impression of him. Greg, on the other hand, being the girlfriend's dad, was very intimidated, but not like a not intimidated in a like a predatory way, or like, I was afraid of him. It was more the amount of respect that guy commands when he's in a room, and it's contagious. And to this day, the moments of brilliance that I was talking about earlier, that I had to capture. A lot of that was Greg and me, realizing, holy, I need to write that down and put it on a post-it and put it on my computer, because that is valuable. So both welcoming, both great guys, and I knew that from the start. And but
So
yeah,
yeah,
I
they
was
they
a little,
are how they are. When people watch them, like, those are those guys. All right. Which one requires the most edits and post?
All right, this is very easy and it's Scott because I'm from the South.
Okay.
I'm from North Georgia, man. There are some things that he says that sayings and colloquials I have never heard of. So sometimes we have to edit those out, and sometimes he doesn't speak too good. But
We got the same guy on we got a guy named Bill on our team. He like just makes this stuff. I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm like, I grew up in Florida, man. I've never heard of that before. And he's like, oh yeah, I just made that up. I'm like, of course you did. I'm like, you are ridiculous.
they don't know what it means. But yeah, definitely Scott with more editing. But it's all in good fun.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I'll even take a soundbite of something he says that's just ridiculous and like run that through the loop. So,
How many screenshots do you have? That's my favorite thing in post is like anytime there's a freeze frame and they have that, I like have a whole folder of like screenshots with captions and I send it out to everyone. I made tons of GIFs. I made tons of like at one point some kid said like one of the people I was talking to said like but and so I added the little and I use that anytime someone Microsoft Teams me a joke, I just send that to them right away. Like how many screen do you do that? Or is this just a crazy thing I do?
especially, I mean, we're in meme culture these days, and especially when coronavirus hit, and us as content creators, we didn't have anything to do. So, like, yeah, I was making stuff like that all the time, sending it in our Slack channels, and for a few good laughs, and um, yeah, it's
All right. So who needs to be sent the run of show multiple times?
Greg.
You're like, Greg, read the GD email, dude. Why can't you see this?
I mean, it's like bold and twice the size of the font, and there's 20 asterisks on both sides. And the email says, Greg, look at that. And then we'll open up the production window, and Scott will be like, Greg, did you see that? And he'll be like, I'm getting it up right now. I'm pulling it up. Yeah, 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 yeah. And you're just like, Greg,
You're like you're reading it, Greg. Like I can see your eyes moving. You can see
come on, man.
this. um, how much trash talking do you give to Scott about the Gamecocks?
All right. In my head, a lot. However, they got us a few years ago. And when a team like South Carolina gets a team like Georgia at their home stadium, you, there's like a 5-year period where I can't talk any trash to Scott. But, I don't know if you know this, but he's actually a huge Clemson fan. He went to South Carolina, but grew up a Clemson fan. So I don't know how that's a weird dynamic there, but I think if I were on the team whenever South Carolina marched into Sanford and whipped our tails, I probably would have heard something about it from Scott.
So you need to move up north because they don't know nothing about damn college football. So I had a Clemson fan, a Notre Dame fan. Somehow there was a Florida fan who really wasn't a Florida fan, and a BC fan. And like I would try to talk trash, and none of like even this one Florida State like 2018 were just horrible. No one's talking anything back to me, so it's fun. You can talk trash without anyone caring. Um, how many days did you give Greg before teasing him about Kansas City losing to old ass Brady?
Those of you, yeah,
Girlfriend's dad slash boss can't really mention that.
for those of you listening to the audio replay, I just zipped my lips and threw away the key. That will never be something.
So like 2 days, Ben? Yeah, 2 days.
I'm totally serious. That is not a topic that we broke.
Okay, sorry, Greg. Okay, final question. What would their go-to karaoke song be, solo or duet?
Islands in the Stream, Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers.
Who sings the Dolly part?
Scott.
All right, Scott. This is really eye-opening, man. They're gonna. I hope Scott and Greg listen to this, and then they send in their version of it. That'd be amazing. We gotta. If for those of you like Clay said, go check out Supply Chain now. Those guys are awesome. You guys do the live streams every Thursday, right? On Instagram or on LinkedIn.
So we
Or
stream
do
live
everything.
across five platforms, probably 3 times a week now. Monday, Thursday, sometimes Wednesday, sometimes Friday. We give each one of our programs a dedicated live stream. So one week we'll have Tequila Sunrise, which is Greg's program, have a live stream. the next week we'll have Tech Talk, which is Corinne Bursa's, have a live stream. So we've nailed down the schedule, but you'll get some surprise ones here and there.
That's fun too, because I think that's kind of, I know the algorithm says do everything on a specific day and can continue this, build up the audience so they can trust you, but it's not how content works. It's not how creativity works. Like there's plenty of times you're like, man, I want to talk this day and I'm really interested about this topic. And then crap happens in the real world. It's not like it waits for a specific day for crap to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to get out of the box and you got to shake it up and you know, Apple, you got to think different. You got to do things differently sometimes, and especially with COVID, I think all of those standards went out the window, especially in content creation.
Oh, especially just the sheer amount of people that join the content creation, right? Like this time last year, like probably at the beginning of last year, it was probably you guys, like not that many people creating the stuff, and all of a sudden, boom, you go on LinkedIn right now, it's everyone everywhere. Back to SCU, kind of start to wrap up. You talked a little bit about it, but how would you suggest a student kind of in high school or college kind of get started, or what's the best way to kind of get their toe wet when it comes to like possibilities of working in the supply chain?
As far as working in the supply chain, just educate yourself and figure out what it is a little bit. Our good friend Sarah Barnes Humphrey put on LinkedIn yesterday, what are some of the most common misconceptions about supply chain? And immediately in my head, it was go ask 100 high schoolers what they think it is, or even just 100 average Joes on the street, what they think it is. And I guarantee you 99 out of 100 of those responses will be misconceptions. So I think if you have any interest, getting into the industry, just, learn the A's and C's, and kind of understand that it is so huge and broad, all encompassing. And it's not just about trucks and moving goods. I mean, it is from end to end. And then with sustainability and circular economy, it is like end to end to end to end and, and more and more and more. So if you want to make a change and make the world a better place, I think that this industry is where you need to be, hands down.
I love it. No, that's one of the coolest things, right? It's making a change, helping the world be a better place, but you're not in a nonprofit. Like that's the one thing, right? You're like doing something that like it's all that work of a nonprofit, but you're in sort of a company. You're doing that type of stuff, whether it be content creation, thought leadership, that type of stuff, and putting that out there. Because I mean, this wasn't sexy 3 years ago. Like they really didn't talk supply chain. They didn't have that stuff. There's a reason the amount of content coming out about supply chain now has
before the toilet paper.
right.
No one really understood what it was, but to your point as well, there are so many verticals within the industry. I mean, we're both marketing guys. I have to, every conversation I have about the supply chain with a geek, I have to be like, man, when you get into the technicalities, you're going to lose me. I can just, so, within the industry itself, there are so many opportunities and things to do that aren't, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be Scott or Greg. You can be me.
You could have had a great college time. Last question, and like this one's it's probably my dumbest question I ever asked, because everyone's like, why would I do something different? But if you had to do it all over again, is there anything you would have done differently? Is there anything like, hey, knowing that like you're still fresh in your career, right? Like you got 1 year under your belt. Like what the hell do you like? Not saying what the hell do you know, but like it's one of those like I don't know what I don't know. But like if you could go back, if you were kind of like senior Clay, like in high school, reading Percy Jackson on the sly so no one knows about it, what would you do differently?
Man, I don't know, and that is tough, and you're exactly right, and it's because you kind of reinvent yourself every day, and every day you should look for new opportunities. And I think maybe that's what I would do differently, is have a more intentional way about myself when I wake up in the morning and be like, hey, I'm going to go figure this out today. I'm going to go do this today. And I just recently have been setting goals, long-term goals and little hobbies that I want to pick up and things like that. And I think, that there's a certain, there's definitely a lot. I'm kind of losing myself a little bit here.
I mean, the long-term goal you have is nail a kickflip, right?
Exactly. always learn and improve. And I think that it's very important from a young age and from an adolescent age, like high school, to encourage yourself and others to wake up and want to go conquer something that day. Attack the day is what our friend Kirby Smart says. Attack the day.
But like you say, right? It's also perfectly fine to not like to be very short term focused and kind of like, what's this? Like, yeah, attack the day. That's 100% nailed it. I don't know why I tried to revamp what you said. I'm an idiot. Clay, tell people how they can get in contact with you. I know the behind the scenes guys, we usually get no love, right? It's all for the sexy Gregs and Scotts of the world. How's the behind the scenes guy? How do they get in contact with you? How do they get to know you?
So the same way that you can get in touch with I'm sure pretty much every guest, LinkedIn. I'm very active. I respond to everything. I love having dialogue on there and engaging with content on there. And further, Clay at supplychainnow.com. And I'm very happy to have a conversation and talk.
Oh, totally, man. I would highly suggest anyone reach out to Clay. You are extremely accessible. I mean, even before we kind of got to know each other, you still were interacting with me. It's kind of this dumb, goofy, fat, bearded guy from the north. So yeah, definitely reach out to you, Clay. I can't thank you enough today. Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, and thanks for giving me the opportunity. It's like kind of like we've touched on a few times. I don't get in front of the camera much, so I always appreciate it. And the production guys have something to say.
Absolutely.
Like Outcast, do you remember that the MTV, the Music Awards?
Oh yeah.
The production guys got something to say. So I really appreciate you having me on, Kyle.
Totally, man. Thanks. Have a great day.
Love what you're doing at Consulting Logistics, and you are adding value to the industry every day, day in and day out. And it's an honor to be in the same industry as you.
Dude, it means so much coming from you guys because you really are trendsetters. You guys are crushing it every single day. I watch what you do and I get jealous every single time. So can't thank you enough, Clay. See you later, man.
See you, Kyle.
And that's our show. Are you a supply chain professional under the age of 30 interested in talking about your journey? Let me know in the comments section and I'll be sure to have you on the show. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Kyle McNaught. Rock and roll.